Thank you very much, Shocks, and a much-deserved trip to New York City and Madison Square Garden for this team, and in particular, Odoamne there, who's going to be receiving Player of the Game here for just an absolutely dominating performance 3 times in a row on Jace. I have to imagine that if you're Samsung Galaxy watching this game, looking towards the semifinals, that is a player that you're going to have to watch out for.
And on the other side of the map, Juve has been looking exceptional as well, so this has to be a great matchup for us to keep an eye on. Both of these guys can play carries, they have incredible champion pools, and here you just see him getting solo kills and using all the resources that he got in this series to pretty much great extent.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, again, that's what's so exciting about like Samsung and H2K facing each other, because there are individual players who are performing much better than we expected coming into the tournament. Like, if before the tournament, you would have said the top lane matchup between these two teams would be the most exciting thing to watch. But right now, it is actually probably the most exciting thing to watch. And we also have all the way down, you know, Crown in the mid lane against Ryu. We have Brulo down bot lane with Core JJ against Forgiven and Vander. Like, all these matchups are super, super exciting. And I even ignored the jungle here, which is probably 2 of the biggest stars of these 2 teams.
And as we say goodbye to ALBUS Nox Luna, I feel that we have to recognize the achievement of this team. You know, they have changed the global perspective on wildcard teams when it comes to international events. People counted them out from the beginning. Here they are qualifying for the quarterfinals, and in pretty, you know, fantastical fashion. And again, here and even in these games, even though you would say, hey, one-sided, you saw the fight and the fire in their eyes.
Oh, yeah. They deserve so much respect just for getting here. They made history, and they did it with style as well.
I mean, on top of that, they're just so nice to watch. Their interviews are just very enjoyable. Just the charisma that this team has is just going to put a really big spotlight onto the region now that for the next year, it's going to be really exciting to see how far they can go.
Inspirational, I think, is what you were looking for there when it comes to listening to these guys. All right, well, we have to look forward, though, now to our semifinal matchups because they are set. So let's go ahead and take a look at the tournament bracket. SKT versus the Rocks Tigers and Samsung Galaxy versus H2K. So, gentlemen, when we look at this bracket, how do we feel?
Fire in the top, ice in the bottom.
Oh, that's true. Blue. We got color-coded. We are coordinated.
I mean, SK Telecom versus Rocks Tigers. This is a match in the making for so long. And I do love rooting for underdogs. Plus, the smiles on the Rocks Tigers' face when they play. I mean, they just enjoy League of Legends so much. And they're going up against the cold, hard champions. Yeah, SKT, they always seem so stoic. They have victory upon victory upon victory.
They're tired of winning.
Back to. It's so exciting for a semifinal.
Yeah, it's kind of hard though to call Rocks Tigers like the underdogs.
I know. I almost shuddered at that, but it's true. It's true.
I mean, in a way, I actually think it's going to be super even because both teams stomped their quarterfinals and had 0 issues, honestly, outside of like 1 game here and there. So I think both teams, if they perform at the peak, I think it's going to be super even, and there's no like big favorite in that matchup. The other one, obviously, Samsung H2K. Samsung will be heavy favorites. One of the problems, I guess a weird problem to have for H2K right now is that people will look at this quarterfinal and say, they beat ANX, so let's not overhype them going into this game. But at the same time, people also underrate them now because, well, they just beat ANX, right? And now they're taking on Samsung. I think actually they can challenge, but I don't think they have, right now, judging from what we saw today, enough to actually take down Samsung, but they have a full week to practice.
Well, by that same token, Samsung did obliterate Cloud9 3-0 fashion just as well, and Cloud9 looked pretty much as helpless as ANX did look today. So I think that we have to be careful with both teams and making sure that we're not really putting one as a heavy favorite.
Especially if we just see, some early game gold leads like we've seen in previous series from both of these teams. Can't count them out as you get later into the stages, and we will probably see more of those high pressure decisions where you have to think about, trading bottom inhibitors for Barons and those types of situations where you really start to sweat.
Well, of course, we did just run the coin toss backstage. Samsung Galaxy picked it up, so they will get side selection on 1, 3, and 5. In a sense, considered the higher seed when it comes to the side selection, whereas H2K will get 2 and 4. But pick bans for that series is going to be very interesting to me, mostly because H2K was not forced to show too much today. As you mentioned, kind of running that same composition, being very happy to run what's working. My question is, if Samsung Galaxy picks up a game or changes up the bans on them, how will H2K react?
I mean, that's super hard to answer right now because obviously teams will now look at this matchup and say, okay, we know their top laning will probably prioritize Kennen very highly if he's open. So how do we find an answer to that? Is Jace going to be banned? There's a lot of different things that can go into this one, but I think it's going to be, once again, much like so many other games, it was a lot about counter picking in the laning phase. And if you are H2K, Caitlyn is a pick you probably won't get to see very often, and that means you have to try and play more around topside. topside like they did today. And that means get a counterpick for Odoamne suddenly becomes a higher priority instead of like maybe counterpicking bot lane.
I mean, there's actually some bans that are jumping out to me already that seem like must bans in this because you mentioned, the Forgiven's affinity for Caitlyn. He doesn't play Jhin, yet Jhin has been one of Ruler's best champions. Yep. I feel like that's a must ban for them. Caitlyn must ban for the other side. And then you get to the solo laners, right? The lane matchups have been so incredibly important as far as draft phase goes. And the one thing that I would push down on priority list on a lot of teams is not only Olaf, but most of the jungle pinching that's been going on. I just feel like the counter picking in lanes has carried a lot more weight.
The one that I feel like you cannot give up is just in Italy, though. Jankos and Ambition can play it very well. And even though we haven't really seen this champion, it's kind of just the idea of giving somebody that champion and the fact that they can get away so far from the other jungler in terms of farm and just pressure advantage that it's too scary of a factor to give away. And that's most likely just going to be a permanently red side ban, which is really difficult to be in that red side situation for H2K.
All right, Deficio, final thoughts here.
Yeah, I think Samsung, honestly, I like your Italy point there. Make sure it's not picked because if you don't fall behind earlier Samsung, you will have superior late game. We've seen that. We've seen H2K struggle there. So for honestly, it's about snowballing early for H2K and close it out. And it's about honestly surviving early game for Samsung.
All right, well, with that, tune in next week as Worlds heads to the heart of the Big Apple. Our final four teams clash in the world's most famous arena with a shot at the Summoners Cup on the line. On Friday, a rematch of last year's World Finals between SK Telecom and ROX Tigers. And on Saturday, it's Samsung Galaxy versus H2K. Now, throughout the tournament, we've seen some huge moments. You called them out on Twitter using the hashtag World's Big Plays. Let's take a look at a few brought to you by XXX, Return of Xander Cage. Our first tweet comes from Kenny O. So this was Peanut's first competitive game on Olaf? What a god. Let's take a look.
Suddenly Peanut is here on the Olaf, a flash forced out of Philip, but he is still chasing on the Deft, who's nearly out of HP. The chase in for Prey. First blood, that's two for Peanut. It might be a third. Oh, the axe landed, meaning Deft got rooted. He gets deleted, and it's Fem who wants a little bit more. Scout running out of health. One more shot would get him.
Just the skill shots landing from ROX to be able to get this. The axe lands as the root happens. Perfect, and that triggers the rest of the dive.
Two axes change the course of this game.
I mean, Kobe, you talked about junglers at the beginning of the day. I feel like in that SKT versus ROX matchup, if Peanut puts up performances like that could be a really big swing for the ROX Tigers. Yeah, that has typically been, where we really focus on in this matchup. That and the mid lane, of course, for Faker and Kuro. I mean, there's just so much history. That's why I kind of feel like if you delve back enough into history, they're underdogs. But currently, they did finally get their LCK victory. It's just that one is definitely going to be very exciting. One of the things from that Olaf clip, though, from Peanut with the first one of the hardest things to do is like get the exact distance on your axe so it just hits the champion model, and he immediately picks it up, hits two more people. I mean, it's
perfect Olaf play. Exactly.
That's the hardest part about him, and getting maximum DPS out of your undertow was very impressive. Well, next up from RNG versus SKT, MLXG's miraculous save brought this tweet out of Michael Balsamo, who exclaimed, "Looper is alive, let's roll it."
Now maybe onto Looper.
Looper's in trouble. Cocoon, but he gets off the slicing maelstrom. There's so much damage. Oh, he got knocked forward. MLXG. He's still
Oh my god,
What on earth was that?
Follow Cocoon, it's a lot of damage, and he's so low now. But then look at the kick. MLXG just repositions, gets the kick off, and then safeguards Looper.
Unbelievable.
It's just such good presence of mind to recognize that in that situation, if you don't get the double kick, you're going to lose that fight horrendously. It's better to wait for it. He does it just right, and wow, that was a beauty.
It really was. I mean, I was kind of sad that the YouTube video I saw online was labeled as Kennen big play.
Oh no!
I mean,
mislabeled.
Yeah, he pressed ulti. It was great, except for the fact that obviously when you have a good Lee Sin player, this champion is just insane. And that's why we always want to see Lee Sin, because the skill cap is just so high.
All right, we've had some sick Lee Sin plays so far this tournament, but again, when it comes to junglers, MLXG, somebody that we looked at as maybe underperforming in comparison to what he looked like at MSI, but those are the types of plays he's going to have to be able to make, the aggressive types of moves that have really helped RNG in the past. What am I talking about? Jesus.
In case there was still play.
It's late on the last day. So finally, Duke went coast to coast. Mr. El Shagan said, "Oh my god, that Narkite from Duke, I can't believe he got the kill on MLXG and survived." Let's see the
Guardian Angel
Narkite.
pops the rest of SK Telecom. They're down in the bottom lane. Xiaohu's left alone. He hops over the minions, sidesteps a deadly flourish. MLXG's looking for the kill. Sonic Wave connects, resonating strike. Duke might just survive.
Get
Mega
back
Knight's
up.
going up. The boomerang, the excitement, the hyper. Duke survives.
I actually hate Mata for that play specifically because
Yes.
he used his root over like a GA target who's still dead, hadn't respawned yet, and then suddenly MLXG was caught in this chase. Doesn't manage to pick up the kill. So let's all blame Mata.
He did miss his Q as well, though, so I think it's on both of them. You got to know that respawn timer on the GA.
Honestly, that game was pretty much almost over anyway. So
Yeah, whatever.
He's just on the mission like, all right, I'm either killing him or that's good.
I like that camera angle, though. Kind of makes you feel like you're playing the Gnar and the one doing the kiting, because Lord knows I don't have those kinds of mechanics. Well, remember to tweet us at LOL Esports when you see a big play using the hashtag World's Big Plays. That's going to do it for us here in Chicago. Stick around for another edition of Worlds Tonight with Shox, Deficio, and Kobe. We'd like to thank the folks here in Chicago for hosting the 2016 Worlds quarterfinal round. Now, for all of us here in the Chicago Theater, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in New York.